I mean, I just feel like anybody would understand at this point. Like, I'll retire the heavyweight belt if I have to.
Jon Jones just shook up the UFC for real. He's done chasing belts, and now the whole heavyweight division's backing him. Leaked chats, quiet calls, and one message spreading fast. We'll get our money elsewhere, but what they're about to do next, that's what's got the UFC freaking out. Jones walks away and the division falls apart. When Jon Jones sat down in front of that camera, you could tell something was different. The guy who'd spent nearly 2 decades as the baddest man on the planet, the fighter who'd obliterated every challenge thrown his way, looked almost relieved. Not defeated, not broken, just done with the whole charade. And then he said it.
I mean, I just feel like anybody would understand at this point. Like, I'll retire the heavyweight belt if I have to. It's like, dude, give the guy what he wants at the end of the day, And I'm not talking about Dana directly. I feel like I'm at a place now where, like I want to take what I find to be super fights. I don't want to fight dangerous up-and-comers anymore. I want to fight dangerous, established champions. So Tom can have the heavyweight championship. I don't really care about it.
Right there, in less than 40 seconds, Jon Bones Jones essentially told the UFC and the entire heavyweight division that the belt they'd all been fighting for meant absolutely nothing to him anymore. The greatest light heavyweight champion of all time, the guy who moved up to heavyweight and demolished Cyril Gane in March 2023 to claim the vacant title like it was destiny, just walked away from it all. And this wasn't one of those contract negotiation theatrics we've seen a million times before. This felt real, final, and honestly kind of liberating for him. The shockwave hit immediately. Within hours, every MMA outlet, every fighter, every fan with a Twitter account was dissecting what this meant. Because here's the thing, Jones wasn't just some guy. He was the linchpin holding the entire heavyweight narrative together. His move to heavyweight was supposed to be the crowning achievement of an already legendary career. Instead, after beating Ngannou, he fought nobody else. 0 title defenses, just endless teasing about a fight with Stipe Miocic that kept getting pushed back, and a torn pectoral tendon in late 2023 that conveniently led to Tom Aspinall facing Sergey Pavlovich for the interim title. Aspinall won that fight, setting up what should have been the UFC's dream scenario, legend versus rising star, the ultimate passing of the torch moment, but Jones made it crystal clear he had 0 interest in that fight. According to MMA Junkie, his frustration wasn't about money alone, it was about creative direction. He didn't want to fight contenders anymore. He wanted legacy bouts, super fights, the kind of spectacle that would elevate his brand beyond the octagon. In his mind, fighting Aspinall wasn't legacy, it was just risk with no real reward. And you know what? He had a point, because while Jones was making these statements, every single heavyweight on the roster was watching what Francis Ngannou had accomplished after walking away from the UFC in 2023. Dana White called it the worst business decision ever. Remember that? Yeah, well, by early 2024, Ngannou had signed a lucrative deal with the PFL and boxed Tyson Fury in a fight that reportedly earned him more money than all his UFC bouts combined. Let that sink in. One boxing match versus years of getting punched in the face for the UFC. That's when the entire heavyweight division started paying attention. For years, these fighters had been told that UFC exposure was worth the lower paychecks, that being in the octagon was the pinnacle, that there was nowhere else to go. But Ngannou proved that was a lie. He walked away and became richer, more famous, and more in control of his own career than he ever was under Dana White's thumb. And when Jones said he didn't care about the belt, fighters understood the subtext immediately. If the UFC wouldn't pay what they were worth, they could find value elsewhere. Tom Aspinall found himself in the worst possible position. The British interim champion had climbed the ranks with surgical precision, knocking out everyone in his path, and now he was holding a title that might mean absolutely nothing. He'd spent months calling for a fight with Jones, only to be met with radio silence. Then, after Jones's latest statement, Aspinall appeared on the MMA Hour, trying to stay diplomatic, but you could hear the frustration bleeding through every word. If he's not interested, fine, Aspinall said, but let's make it clear, this division can't be held hostage forever. Either fight or vacate. I'm ready to defend against anyone, anywhere. Behind the scenes, multiple sources told Bloody Elbow that fighters were growing increasingly impatient with the UFC's refusal to make interim champions feel legitimate. Without the real belt, the money stayed low, the exposure stayed minimal, and by mid-2024, several heavyweights had one-year contracts expiring, and whispers began circulating that a collective exit could be brewing. Not a strike, not a union, just a quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, they didn't need the UFC as much as the UFC needed defeated them. Jones's declaration about only wanting super fights triggered a massive debate about the UFC's entire direction. Fans who'd watched Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, and Khabib Nurmagomedov leave the sport started questioning whether Dana White had built too much around celebrity matchups and not enough around merit-based competition. When you lean too heavily on spectacle, YouTuber crossovers, reality shows, headline-friendly drama, the actual sport starts to suffer. And heavyweight MMA was suffering. The idea of Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic felt nostalgic, sure, but both fighters were nearing 40 years old. Meanwhile, the division's newer stars, Aspinall, Pavlovich, Gane, Almeida, were losing momentum in the spotlight vacuum. Analyst Chael Sonnen noted in his podcast that the UFC had painted itself into a corner. If Jon doesn't fight, you've got a champion who doesn't want to fight, and a promotion that won't admit he's gone. That was the breaking point, the moment when the UFC's own formula began working against it. Because while Dana White was trying to hold the division together with duct tape and promises, fighters were having private conversations about what came next. By May 2024, rumors surfaced that the UFC's heavyweight division was internally divided. Fighters' managers reportedly began coordinating, exploring how to push back against restrictive contracts that prevented them from boxing, streaming, or monetizing personal brands independently. Behind the scenes, fighters were allegedly sharing revenue numbers, something previously taboo. The discovery that mid-tier heavyweights were making less than $300,000 per fight, while the company generated over $1 billion annually, shattered any remaining illusions of fairness. And then came the leak that changed everything. A message, allegedly from a group chat involving multiple heavyweight fighters, surfaced online. It read, "We'll get our money elsewhere." At first, fans thought it was fake, some elaborate Reddit hoax, but then Jairzinho Rosenstruik and Marcin Tybura posted cryptic messages on Instagram about loyalty not paying bills. Aspinall liked one of the posts. Within a week, Curtis Blades hinted on Twitter that fighters are finally talking. Dana White brushed it off during a press conference, saying people say all kinds of things when they're emotional. But inside the UFC offices, executives knew something had fundamentally shifted. Dana White had built the UFC empire through control, centralized matchmaking, uniform pay structure, and a branding model that made fighters interchangeable. The UFC was the show, not the athletes, but the heavyweight division was different. Its fighters weren't interchangeable. They were massive, marketable, and often financially literate. And now, many were exploring paths that bypassed the UFC altogether. Promotions like PFL, One Championship, and Bellator began reaching out. And as one PFL executive reportedly told The Athletic, the UFC's biggest problem is that they made their fighters realize they have leverage. Dana's plan to unify the belts before year-end began collapsing when Jones didn't return by summer. The company tried to build Aspinall versus Gane as a headline fight, but fans were uninterested without the real belt on the line. Pay-per-view numbers dropped, sponsorships slowed. The heavyweight crown, once the UFC's most valuable symbol, had become a ghost belt. For all the drama surrounding his comments, Jon Jones's retirement announcement wasn't just about walking away. It was a statement of principle, and perhaps a subtle rebellion of his own. Jones had spent his career clashing with the UFC over money, promotion, and creative control. His move to heavyweight was supposed to be redemption, but instead it became a mirror reflecting the UFC's internal contradictions. He wanted freedom. Ngannou had taken it, now others were ready to follow. And that's what made his statement, "I've created something much bigger," resonate beyond MMA. He was signaling to every fighter watching, you don't need the UFC to be legendary anymore. Fighters coordinate the rebellion behind closed doors. In April 2024, something unprecedented happened during UFC 300 Fight Week in Las Vegas. Several top 15 heavyweights gathered informally, and on the surface, it looked like a typical Fight Week hangout. Fighters do this all the time. Grab dinner, talk shop, decompress before the chaos. But according to a source close to one of the fighters, this wasn't just another casual meetup. It was the first time UFC athletes had openly discussed collective bargaining without the UFC's involvement. Names floated in and out of that room. Curtis Blades, Tom Aspinall, Tai Tuivasa, Sergey Pavlovich, Alexander Volkov. Some were under contract, others nearing expiration, but the common thread was the same. Everyone felt undervalued. One fighter reportedly said something that would become a rallying cry weeks later. "They tell us we're independent contractors, but when we try to negotiate, they treat us like employees." That line cut right to the heart of the issue. The UFC wanted it both ways. They wanted fighters to be independent contractors so they didn't have to provide benefits, healthcare, or guaranteed pay. But they also wanted complete control over every aspect of a fighter's career. Sponsorships, outside appearances, even boxing matches. It was the worst of both worlds for the athlete, and they were finally starting to realize it. Around May 2024, screenshots began to circulate on Reddit and Twitter of what appeared to be a private group chat titled "The Real Heavyweight Division." The messages weren't verified at first, but their tone sounded unmistakably authentic. One read, "Jones made his move. We can't all stay quiet. We'll get our money elsewhere." Another followed, "Imagine if all of us sit out for 6 months. What card they got got left. The leak gained serious traction when Derek Lewis responded cryptically on Twitter, "It's funny till it ain't." Within 48 hours, MMA outlets including Bloody Elbow and Sportskeeda covered the story. The UFC issued no official comment, but multiple insiders confirmed that internal calls had been made to fighter managers warning them to shut down any coordination talk. Behind the scenes, Hunter Campbell, the UFC's chief business officer, reportedly began calling select fighters individually, offering short-term incentive bonuses for staying quiet. But the timing only reinforced the fighters' sense that they had leverage. If Dana White was rattled, he didn't show it. During a post-fight press conference, he doubled down. "Listen, everybody's got opinions about money. Fighters get paid what they're worth. If they don't like it, nobody's forcing them to stay here." That quote spread like wildfire. For the first time, fighters began to publicly respond, not with insults, but with data. Tom Aspinall posted a side-by-side breakdown comparing his UFC interim title purse with Francis Ngannou's disclosed PFL earnings, captioned, "Do the math." Curtis Blades tweeted a list of independent sponsorship deals he'd been denied because of UFC's exclusive apparel contract with Venom. And Cyril Gane went on French television to say, "We love fighting, but love doesn't pay bills." This was no longer quiet dissent. It was coordinated, data-driven defiance. The core of the conflict wasn't emotional, it was contractual. Under the UFC's standard fighter agreement, athletes have signed over likeness rights in perpetuity, meaning the company could profit from their name and image forever, even after retirement. The contracts also forbade fighters from seeking outside sponsorships or competing in other combat sports without explicit approval. For years, these clauses went unchallenged, but after Ngannou's success and Jones's exit, lawyers began circling. Attorney Lucas Middlebrook, who represented Nick Diaz in his athletic commission battle, told The Athletic, "If fighters act collectively, even informally, the UFC's independent contractor defense collapses." The realization hit the fighters hard. They didn't need a union, they just needed unity. By mid-2024, several managers had begun quietly consulting with antitrust lawyers who had worked on the Lever Zuffa lawsuit, a long-running class action suit claiming the UFC used monopolistic practices to suppress fighter pay. The timing couldn't have been worse for Dana White. As negotiations stalled, some fighters took more direct action. Curtis Blades withdrew from a scheduled co-main event in July 2024, citing contractual evaluation. Marcin Tybura reportedly turned down a fight offer, saying he wasn't interested in helping build a card that doesn't build him. Tai Tuivasa went on record saying, "Wow, if you're gonna risk your life every time you walk in there, you should be set for life when you walk out." By August, the UFC heavyweight roster was in chaos. Fight cards had to be reshuffled multiple times. Contenders were refusing short-notice bouts, and even mid-tier fighters began hinting at side projects, boxing, streaming, even influencer matchups to build leverage. The phrase, "get our money elsewhere," stopped being a quote from Elite. It became a banner slogan. In early September 2024, Dana White held a closed-door meeting with a group of top heavyweights in Las Vegas. It wasn't filmed, but multiple attendees later leaked what happened to reporters. According to MMA Mania, Dana opened the session by saying, "Nobody's gonna strong-arm the UFC. You guys signed deals. We've honored them." But when Tom Aspinall reportedly replied, "Then why's the belt meaningless if the champ doesn't defend it?" the room went silent. Another fighter, unnamed in the reports, allegedly told Dana directly, "You can't call this the best division in the world if the best fighters don't want to fight here anymore." The meeting ended abruptly. 2 days later, fighters' managers began receiving emails about performance bonuses and appearance incentives. It was damage control. Too little, too late. As the standoff escalated, the UFC's image began to take hits in the media. Outlets like The Guardian, Forbes, and ESPN ran features comparing fighter pay to other sports leagues. An ESPN piece titled "The UFC's Billion-Dollar Problem: Why Fighters Are Fed Up" revealed that the UFC paid fighters less than 18% of total revenue, compared to 48 to 50% in boxing and the NFL. Fans who had long defended Dana White's fighter exposure argument began to question it. Comment threads filled with posts like, "If they're independent, why can't they work elsewhere?" Dana tried to rally public sentiment, reminding audiences that the UFC had made its fighters famous, but the landscape had changed. Fighters now had platforms of their own. Tai Tuivasa's YouTube show gained 500,000 subscribers. Derek Lewis started a podcast. Curtis Blades began doing financial breakdowns of fighter purses. The narrative was slipping from UFC control. By October 2024, whispers of a coordinated walkout began spreading. It wasn't a union or strike. That would violate contracts. Instead, fighters would simply go dark and refuse to accept new fight offers until certain terms were renegotiated. According to Combat Sports Insider, at least 8 ranked heavyweights were considering the move. The UFC scrambled to downplay the rumors, announcing new matchups like Aspinall versus Pavlovich II and Gane versus Spivak, but neither event generated traction. Fans began to call them shadow cards. Meanwhile, Francis Ngannou dropped a subtle post on Twitter that fanned the flames. "They said it couldn't be done. Then I did it. Who's next?" It was the perfect spark. By November 2024, a handful of fighter managers began meeting independently, calling themselves the MMA Representation Alliance. While not not officially a union, it operated as a strategic coalition, sharing legal resources, media contacts, and negotiation tactics. Their central argument was simple. If fighters were truly independent, they should be free to box, sign sponsorships, and stream without UFC interference. Sports Illustrated confirmed that at least 12 active UFC heavyweights were affiliated with the MRA, with more considering joining. Dana White called the group a bunch of vultures, but privately, UFC executives were worried. According to internal estimates cited by The Athletic, the company risked losing up to $150 million in pay-per-view value if the top 5 heavyweights refused to fight. The same report claimed that executives floated the idea of creating an interim belt just to keep events moving, a move that would have been historically unprecedented and widely ridiculed. Through it all, Tom Aspinall stayed mostly quiet. He was the bridge between old and new, the interim champ still under contract, but also the most respected voice among fighters. Then, in December 2024, he posted a black screen on Instagram with one sentence: "We fight for freedom, not favors." The caption, #elsewhere. That word, elsewhere, instantly trended across MMA Twitter. Within hours, fighters like Blades, Tuivasa, and Volkov reposted it. The phrase became the unofficial name of the movement, the Elsewhere era. Fans made memes, t-shirts, and compilation videos celebrating fighters taking their power back. And ironically, the UFC's own marketing machine couldn't ignore it. By the time 2025 began, every press event, every fighter scrum, every media day came back to one question: is the heavyweight division gone? Facing declining pay-per-view buys and rising public criticism, Dana tried one final tactic, a record-setting loyalty bonus offer to Tom Aspinall. According to MMA Junkie, it included $8 million for 2 fights and a guaranteed co-main event slot at UFC 310. Aspinall reportedly refused, saying through his manager, "We're not negotiating for ourselves, we're negotiating for the future. The exodus happens and everything changes forever." When 2025 began, the UFC heavyweight division was a shell of what it once was. Fight announcements slowed, promo videos vanished, and the belt, once the crown jewel of combat sports, sat untouched for months. Inside the company, morale was slipping. Outside, the fighters were mobilizing. The whispers had become public. The Elsewhere era was no longer an inside joke or a social media hashtag. It was a rebellion, and the world was about to see it unfold live. The first to go was Curtis Blades. In early March 2025, news broke that Blades had officially been released from his UFC contract by mutual agreement. Within 24 hours, PFL CEO Don Davis confirmed that Blades had signed a multi-fight deal to compete under the PFL Superfight division, the same league that hosted Francis Ngannou's global showcase bouts. The announcement shook the sport. Blades wasn't a retired veteran or fringe contender. He was a top 5 heavyweight in his prime. PFL's official statement read, "We welcome Curtis Blades to the next generation of fighter empowerment. Here, athletes are partners, not products." That phrasing, partners, not products, became a direct jab at the UFC's model. Dana White responded days later during a press conference, "Good for him. I hope it works out. But everybody who leaves finds out pretty quick the grass ain't greener." But the problem was, for the first time, it was. When the financial terms leaked through Forbes, Blades' base pay per fight was reportedly $2.5 million, with revenue share and personal sponsorship rights included. His last UFC base purse, $265,000. That 10 times jump sent shockwaves through locker rooms. Suddenly, every fighter with a contract nearing expiration was calling their manager. By late March, Tai Tuivasa posted a beer emoji and the word "elsewhere" on Twitter. Days later, Alexander Volkov quietly removed UFC fighter from his bio. And then came the biggest shock of all. For months, Tom Aspinall had tried to stay respectful, caught between loyalty to the UFC and belief in the cause. He was the interim champion, technically bound to the promotion. But after months of silence and stalled negotiations, he made his move. In April 2025, Aspinall posted a video message to his social media accounts. Sitting in his home gym, surrounded by family and training partners, he spoke calmly. The clip hit 1 million views in less than 2 hours. Dana White's reaction came minutes later at a media scrum in Miami. If he's leaving, that's his choice. But we'll keep building stars. Nobody's bigger than the UFC. Except now, that wasn't true anymore. Within the next 60 days, 6 more ranked heavyweights either requested releases or refused to resign. Tai Tuivasa signed with PFL. Marcin Tybura was rumored to join KSW in Poland. Jairzinho Rozenstruik signed with one championship. Sergey Spivak took an extended hiatus, citing contractual stress. Derek Lewis started his own podcast and announced a boxing debut. Alexander Volkov joined Ngannou's management group under CAA. Each departure made headlines. Together, they became a story no PR spin could contain. The Guardian called it the Great Heavyweight Exodus. ESPN ran the headline, "Fighters are finally walking away, and they're winning." Inside the UFC, panic spread. Pay-per-view. Cards were collapsing. Negotiations with ESPN Plus hit snags. Sponsors began asking if the company's future cards would still have big men, and yet Dana refused to back down. On May 10th, 2025, PFL made a monumental announcement, the creation of a global heavyweight super league, a cross-promotional final event series featuring fighters from PFL, ONE, Risen, and KSW. Francis Ngannou, Tom Aspinall, and Curtis Blades were listed as founding participants. The event's tagline, "We'll get our money elsewhere." It was more than marketing, it was a movement solidified into an institution. The league's investors included Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, Netflix Sports, and a private consortium tied to DAZN. Reports from Reuters indicated that each fighter would earn a minimum of $3 million per bout, plus global streaming royalties. For the first time, fighters had real ownership, a model Dana White had once called impossible. Then came the twist no one saw coming. In June 2025, Jon Jones appeared on stage at the Elsewhere League press event in Riyadh. Wearing a black suit, he stood beside Ngannou and Aspinall and addressed the media. Jones wasn't returning as a fighter, he was announced as an executive ambassador for the league, reportedly earning a seven-figure annual salary. Dana White's response was predictably defiant. "John's doing whatever he's doing. Good for him. We're still the biggest show in the world." But numbers told a different story. According to Sports Business Journal, the launch of the Elsewhere League's debut event, streamed globally on Netflix, drew 8.1 million live viewers, surpassing any UFC card that year. Social media engagement exploded. Fighters promoted their own bouts independently. Training vlog series, sponsorship deals, and behind-the-scenes documentaries flooded YouTube. The UFC still held its market dominance, but the narrative had shifted permanently. Even Joe Rogan, a longtime UFC commentator, commented on his podcast, "Man, the fighters are doing what we always said they should. They're realizing they can control their own brand." That single quote symbolized the irreversible shift in power. By July 2025, UFC executives reportedly floated the idea of creating a heavyweight revival tournament to rebuild the division with new prospects, but even that met skepticism. ESPN reported that the proposed prize pool was $1 million total, a figure dwarfed by PFL's single-fight payouts. Former champion Stipe Miocic, who had remained under contract but inactive, told The Athletic, "They can build new stars, sure, but stars don't build themselves in cages. They need respect." Behind closed doors, UFC board members were reportedly debating how much longer Dana White could keep control. Insiders told the New York Times that Endeavor, the UFC's parent company, had lost over $200 million in projected earnings from canceled heavyweight events. The brand was still profitable, but bleeding influence. The Elsewhere League's first event, Genesis, took place in August 2025 at King Abdullah Sports City in Jeddah. The card featured Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blades at 2 as the main event, Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and Tai Tuivasa versus Marcin Tybura. It was a reunion of fighters who had once been defined by the UFC, now free from it. The event trended globally on Twitter with over 3 million concurrent posts. Netflix reported record sports viewership in over 30 countries. But more than numbers, it was the symbolism. The world's best heavyweights fighting under their own banner, on their own terms. Ngannou's post-fight interview summed it up best. "This isn't rebellion, it's evolution." As the Elsewhere League thrived, the UFC's heavyweight scene dwindled. Dana White announced that the UFC Heavyweight Championship was officially retired until further notice, an unprecedented move. Analysts from MMA Junkie called it a quiet surrender. Mid-level fighters began exploring boxing matches. Even welterweights and light heavyweights started citing Elsewhere as leverage in contract talks. Sponsors who once paid the UFC directly began negotiating individual deals with fighters, bypassing the promotion entirely. It was the beginning of decentralization, something the UFC had fought against for 2 decades. By October 2025, what started as Jon Jones's offhand remark, "Tom can have the title, I don't care," had evolved into a global reformation of how fighters approached value and autonomy. Even rival sports leagues took notice. The NBA Players Association reportedly sent observers to the Elsewhere League's Riyadh summit to study its revenue-sharing model. The UFC wasn't dead, far from it, but its aura of invincibility had cracked. Fighters realized they could make money and maintain freedom. Fans realized they didn't need a UFC logo to enjoy elite combat. And the heavyweight division, once the UFC's backbone, had become the heart of a new era. In an October 2025 interview with The Guardian, Jon Jones reflected on his choice to retire from the UFC. His words were measured but powerful. "I didn't start this to burn bridges. I just wanted fighters to dream bigger than a belt. Now they're doing it." He smiled, adding, "Tom's got his title, but the rest of us, we got our freedom." The interviewer described it as a moment of quiet triumph. By the end of 2025, combat sports looked nothing like it had a year before. The UFC remained a powerhouse, still hosting stars, still selling arenas, but it was no longer the only show in town. The Elsewhere League announced its second season, with plans to expand into boxing and grappling. Fighters who once dreamed of signing UFC contracts were now dreaming of independence. Analysts began referring to the movement as the fighter renaissance. Even UFC loyalists admitted the truth. The company would never again have total control. And it all began with one man saying he didn't care about the belt. Jon Jones's statement wasn't just retirement, it was revolution.